Okay. Before you start attacking me in the comments and saying I'm fake news, hear me out. I think Stranger Things' first season was great. Not perfect, but it was very well done. It was a Stephen King-esque horror with a well-paced mystery to it that kept you wanting to know what was even going on, causing a majority of people to binge watch it over the course of a day or two like some coke adult fiend. And rather than just be a huge nod to the 80s with a lot of wink-nod references and homages, it almost felt like it was something pulled directly from that era because of the way it was stylized and edited. But aside from the huge 80s nostalgia kick we're currently going through now, I think the reason that so many people loved this show, despite the fact the story wasn't anything new, was that all the characters felt fun and unique in their own way. Seeing the story unfold through the eyes of the kids added this weird sense of awe and danger to everything, and even the adults, who would normally be a hindrance to the investigation, actively contributed to what was going on. One of the best testaments to the writing was that it took two characters that would have been cliché antagonists in any other 80s movie and made them into some of the most beloved characters in the series, completely subverting the tropes they were associated with really solid writing and character motivations. But while I genuinely loved season 1 of Stranger Things when it first came out, I was in the camp that I didn't really need more once it finished. There was a small cliffhanger at the end, but aside from that, I felt the show ended extremely well. Everyone had their own character arcs, with all of them culminating together at the end with a very satisfying, if not bittersweet ending, and that's all that was really needed. It was this nice little 8-hour movie that had a beginning, middle, and end. And maybe this is just me, but personally, I'm the type that likes to see things have an actual conclusion rather than continuously go on until it goes stale and everyone starts to wonder when it went bad. Simpsons. Family Guy. So, I didn't think a season 2 was entirely necessary for Stranger Things. But despite my apprehensions, I was still interested in seeing where the Duffer Brothers were going to take this story and their characters going into a second season. Plus, admittedly, that thriller trailer actually kinda sold me on it. Who knows, maybe I'd be wrong and the Duffer Brothers would pull off the bigger and better Stranger Things 2 that they promised. And initially, I started off the season really enjoying it, with the arcade scene where the kids desperately scrounge for quarters to go play Dragon's Lair being one of the most endearing moments in the entire show. But with each episode, more and more problems started to pop up. I gave a lot of them the benefit of the doubt though, as they could be fixed by the end, but when I got to the final episode, instead of having that nice, gratifying feeling I had at the end of the last season, like when you finish a good book, I just felt frustrated. And no, this isn't a video meant to complain about episode 7. Mostly. Now, I will start by saying there's a lot of things done well in season 2. The cinematography and shot composition is next level, with the rotating dolly shot when Hopper lands in the tunnel being a major standout. And like most people, I think the stuff between Dustin and Steve was genuinely charming. But I believe that the Duffer Brothers weren't exactly prepared for a second season of the show when they got the green light. And nowhere does it show more than how they wrote their characters. From adding a lot of fan-pandering moments, to making some characters straight up unlikable, to some having no purpose whatsoever and repeating what they'd already done before. And since Stranger Things 2 has been established as such a character-driven show, this feels worse than if it was a serialized cartoon or a silly JRPG. Before I go any further though, I think it's important to say that this isn't about me trying to retroactively change your mind about something you might have liked. If you enjoyed season 2, that's cool, I'm genuinely glad you did. This video is more pointing out what I think are glaring flaws with this season of the show, as there are quite a few. So with all that out of the way, I'm gonna go over and explain why Stranger Things 2 is poorly written. Oh god, I'm gonna get crucified for this. So the season starts off roughly a year after the events of season 1, and everyone is still readjusting to life now that Will is back from the Upside Down, and Eleven seemingly kamikazed herself along with the Demogorgon. What happened the year before was very emotionally taxing on everyone and has clearly changed them, for better or for worse. with Mike being one of the most affected. While he's trying to live a normal life again, our protagonist from last season was greatly changed by his time spent with his magic best friend E.T. I mean 11, and misses her so much that he tries to contact her every night through some undisclosed radio channel. On top of all this, he has to deal with things from the Upside Down invading the world yet again, and his best friend being the conduit for some Cthulhu smog monster. All of this could lead to some really emotional character moments for Mike, with him learning to let people in after his loss, and concluding with a very heartwarming reunion with Elle at the end to tie it all together. It's just too bad that Mike is a fucking asshole. Yeah, this entire season, Mike is a dick to everyone that isn't named 11 or Will. From being mildly racist to his friend, to stealing money from his sister. A lot of these things could be forgiven though, as he's a kid and kids are well documented as being stupid, but then the show introduces the new girl, Max. For moment one after they introduce her, Mike goes out of his way to treat Max like she just kicked his dog. Even when Lucas and Dustin are simply showing interest in her because they think she's the Mad Max from the arcade, Mike seemingly takes issue with this and doesn't even want to consider it. I understand he doesn't like the idea of someone replacing 11 and lashes out because of it, and I know they can't tell Max about what happened as they apparently signed some legal waivers saying they wouldn't tell anybody about 11 and the Upside Down, but at a certain point, it just starts to feel mean-spirited. And I like Max. She's a fun character, so it sucks to see her abused and pushed around by pretty much everyone that isn't trying to date her. I mean, I know she doesn't really do anything, but Mike doesn't need to be such a dick about it.
This is the boys' room.
Yes, sir?
So you should go home.
Now the thing is, you can make someone being a jerk work as a character building moment, but there needs to be that point of redemption with the other character, especially when it comes to the ones that are meant to be likable. There doesn't need to be an outright apology per se, but there needs to be a scene where the two characters reconcile and start to have a mutual understanding of each other, allowing them both to develop as characters. Give them what one would call an emotional arc. You know, like that scene that Lucas, Elle, and Mike shared at the end of season 1, where they came together and apologized for their shitty behavior towards each other.
I'm sorry, too. Me too.
And this is largely why Mike's character this season bothers me so much, as they had the perfect opportunity to do this exact thing between Max and Mike and bring everything full circle, but didn't. Halfway through episode 8, Mike and Max share a scene together while everyone works on making an interrogation room in the shed. And it's here that Max tells Mike that she knows about 11 and what happened last year. She essentially tells Mike that she understands why he's been such an unbelievable dick, and gets how important Elle was to him. This scene right here would have been the perfect opportunity for Mike to respond in kind, saying something along the lines of, you know, maybe we could use a Zoomer in the party. Essentially allowing her to join this group that she'd already been helping out for the last several episodes. But no. In fact, he doubles down on his bullshit.
And just because you know the truth, it doesn't mean you're in our party. You do know that, right?
Yeah, I know.
Whoa. What a dick.
It's at this point that you might be asking, why does it matter if Mike's a moody jerk? Does this really change the value of the story? Well, other than the fact that they're recycling a plotline from last season but doing it worse, the bigger problem with this is that Mike never has to change before he meets back up with Elle. Their reunion should have been the culmination of their individual character arcs, where they both had to grow and change with their own personal trials and tribulations, and their reward is being reunited. But nope, Mike gets exactly what he wants without any need to change or develop past who he was at the start of the season. And this makes it feel like it wasn't earned. He mopes, has a sad face, then Elle comes back, and he's happy again. End of story. And what makes this worse is that 11 did have her own arc. It has its own issues, and we'll get to that later, but you know at least she had a development. She went out, grew as a person, and fulfilled her half of the agreement. Mike, on the other hand, doesn't change or ever have to apologize and grow, which makes his constant asshole-ish behavior look worse, and to me, ruined his emotional reunion with Eleven at the end. I think the writers had trouble properly bringing Eleven back into the kids group without completely invalidating her sacrifice last season, because if she came back to Mike and the others in episode 1 or 2, it would have made the whole thing seem rather pointless. So they had to come up with this longer game plan that made the reunion have more of an impact. Which is a good idea if you're going to bring back a character that seemingly died off. It's just too bad they botched it with how repetitively emotional they wrote Mike this entire season, as well as some other problems we'll get to later. Mike isn't the only one who has writing issues as a pairing though, which leads me to... One of the things that kept people invested in Stranger Things when it first came out was the mystery behind it. Where did Will go? What's this weird facility that Matthew Modine is running? What was Winona Ryder looking at? However, a lot of the mystery that fueled the interest in the first season was uncovered by the end. We still didn't know what exactly the Upside Down is or what the Demogorgon was, but those are more filling in details that aren't exactly needed and is almost better left up to the imagination. Essentially, Will was already found, and the threat is pretty much known. So, what do you do when you have a horror mystery show that has already solved the mystery? I guess that's when you have to rely on your characters. Instead of the audience being interested in the mystery of Hawkins, let's now replace it with a lot of relationship tension this time around. I think this was the idea for Stranger Things 2 because there's so much focus on the romantic relationships this season. Aside from Mike and Eleven, there are 3 love triangles existing in this one season alone. So we now go from the Stephen King horror mystery hour to Days of Our Lives. Okay, this could potentially work, as it could lead to some internal character growth with how the pairings develop and the tension that it might bring. Except it results in every female character existing primarily to be in a relationship, and once the pairings are made, they don't really have anything to do. In the first season, all the individual subplots going on met up at the end and led to a really satisfying climax when they all came together. However, this season, a lot of them don't add anything once we get to the finale and come off as more needless filler. Let's start with Max as an example. As I said, I like Max. She's introduced as this spunky tomboy character that I was hoping would have a lot of importance this season. We had yet to see the kids interact with a girl, as Eleven wasn't exactly a normal kid, so there was a lot of places they could take Max. She was shown to be able to pick locks and had skills as a gamer, so she could have been the tech person in the kids group, or been the brave girl that stands up to the monsters while the boys cower in fear, a la the movie It. But what they instead did with her was nothing. Look at her doing all that nothing, not contributing anything. Effectively, Max is the Poochie of this season. She's a new character meant to expand the cast. She's cool, she's got attitude, she even skateboards. But ultimately, she doesn't really add anything to the story, despite how the earlier episodes might lead you to think otherwise.
I could be your Zoomer.
That's not even a real thing.
It could be.
Because she doesn't know what the hell is going on for the first half due to being kept in the dark, Max doesn't really get any opportunities to contribute what is currently happening. And even after she learns what's up, she's still always 2 steps behind everyone else and is more just dragged along for the ride. She could be seen as an audience surrogate so that information can be relayed to us through her, except we already know exactly what happened or simply can learn through context, so this isn't entirely necessary. Ultimately, her biggest contribution is that she is someone for Lucas and Dustin to compete over, which is important because, well, Lucas also didn't have much going on this season. And I will give the writers this, the scene where Max opens up to Lucas is well written. This is a nice moment that establishes Max as a person and shows us that she trusts Lucas. Once the relationship between Lucas and Max is cemented though, there isn't much to do. And that happens in episode 6, so that means there's 3 episodes of nothing for them to do. She does have her development of standing up to her strongly implied racist brother, but it's barely tangential to the plot itself and kind of feels like filler while the actual plot is going on. I don't think every character has to have some huge contribution to the story, but considering how much it felt like they were setting up Max as being an integral part of the group, it's rather disappointing how little she actually adds to it, as you could remove her and her brother from the story, and I don't think there would be anything lost from it.
Yeesh, someone's cranky. Past her bedtime?
Now let's move on to Joyce. She has a bit more to do with the stuff regarding Will, which we'll get to later, but this season it's clear they're now pushing a relationship between her and Hopper. Admittedly, this relationship is the one I have the least problems with, since this one's a bit more subtextual and doesn't really distract from the plot much, but it does have a clear effect on one other character, because between seasons, the writers also gave Joyce a throwaway Sean Astin. Very much like a romantic comedy in the 90s, Joyce is supposed to be with a character we all know she'll end up with, but that means we have to find a way to get rid of her nice boring boyfriend that she currently has, because a healthy ongoing relationship isn't as appealing as one that can be shipped. When Bob is introduced, he's clearly meant to provide two things: the occasional tech support, and then to die off so that Joyce can be with Hopper next season, as well as establish the stakes of the third act. And that's about it. And they don't exactly kill off Bob with subtlety either. Like, why would someone as smart as Bob, who just finished running for his life from something that could easily kill him, stop as soon as a wooden door is closed? Would he not want to get the hell out of the building while they have the chance, instead of just staring gawk-eyed at Joyce, who he just saw 5 minutes ago? This one is more of a personal gripe, and I know cliches are what Stranger Things is built on, but this just feels like lazy writing. Though I'm sure next season we'll get a Justice for Bob subplot somewhere. Speaking of, if there's any more proof that the Duffer Brothers weren't sure what to do with their characters for a second season, it's the Nancy and Jonathan subplot. At the end of the first season, Nancy's still together with the newly minted nice guy Steve, but it is strongly implied that she might have grown feelings for Jonathan while they were out investigating. So when we jump into season 2, we now have to figure out a way for her to get away from the reformed Steve so that she can get with Jonathan, all while trying to have it work into the events of the plot.
It's bullshit.
With this season, Nancy's still showing signs of guilt about Barb's apparent death, despite the fact that last season ended with everybody seemingly forgetting about Barb's existence once the main plot was resolved. So either she's been complaining about Barb dying for the last 10 months or so and hasn't done anything, or this is only bothering her now and just decided to do something about it. Hashtag Justice for Barb. This is then used to push Steve away, as he doesn't think it's a great idea to tell Barb's parents about the truth since the government's watching them, and they apparently signed some NDAs about not telling people about what happened, causing Nancy to get angry at him. The thing is that compared to how he acted in season 1, when they had this exact same argument, Steve is acting fairly reasonable. Aside from leaving a drunk Nancy at the party, it makes sense that he would be frustrated that Nancy said she didn't love him, and wouldn't want to get in trouble with the government by telling Barb's parents the truth. But we need something to split the two up so that Nancy would go to Jonathan for help, so I guess this will have to do. So now that Nancy and Jonathan are paired up again, she wants to investigate the laboratory to see if there's anything going on, even though the two pretty well know exactly what's going on in there from their adventures last year. It's not a surprise for the audience that the lab is investigating the Upside Down, and is trying to close it because of what happened last time. Paul Reiser is acting rather suspicious about it, making you think there's something else going on, but the big reveal is that he's being 100% truthful. If the reveal was that the lab was doing something else, like the scientists were actually trying to open the gate further so that they could harness its power to attack those damn Ruskies, then the recording that Nancy got might have had some importance. But in actuality, the trip there doesn't actually show us anything. Also, as an aside, why would a secret facility that's all about making sure nothing gets leaked out to the public, I don't know, not check people for recording equipment? it's not like they weren't aware of the fact that Jonathan and Nancy were attempting to expose them, since that's exactly how they got the agent's attention in the first place. So why would they not at least frisk them? But regardless, this tape is only really meant to push Nancy and Jonathan together further, as they have to then take it to the conspiracy reporter Murray. Now, Murray could have been an interesting idea for the story. He's this weird, curmudgeon type character that's super into government conspiracies, something which is going on a lot in Hawkins, so it would have made sense if he was one of the key players when it came to investigating what was actually happening. However, Murray serves no narrative purpose aside from spurning Jonathan and Nancy together. He only has one interaction before this with Hopper in order to establish his character, but aside from this, he's fairly absent from the plot as a whole. You could make the argument that publishing the tapes is what ultimately closed down the lab, meaning Nancy finally got Barbara justice, except most of the people involved in the event were either brutally murdered by 11 last year or by the demo dogs this year. So there really isn't any catharsis gained from seeing them get shut down. And the three ended up watering down the truth and said that it was a contamination leak that killed Barb, so it's not like the truth getting out actually mattered or had any lasting ramifications. So again, Murray only exists in this story so that when Nancy and Jonathan visits him, he can give them some textbook psychoanalysis that gives the two justification to throw caution to the wind and finally consummate their love. Also, isn't it a bit creepy that this older man is basically telling two teenagers to have drunk sex?
But if I were you, I'd just cut the bullshit and share the damn bed.
Yeah, kind of unsettling, isn't it? Okay, so we finally got Nancy and Jonathan together. What are they gonna do now? Oh, that's right, Steve exists. How's he gonna react to all this since Nancy and him never technically broke up?
It's okay, Nancy. It's okay.
Okay, so Steve basically absolves Nancy without needing to have any discussion whatsoever. Just earlier that day, he was going back to her house to make up with her, so where did this revelation for Steve come from that he knows that Nancy should be with Jonathan? We as the audience know that because we've been watching the two together this entire time, but Steve hasn't, so again, where did this come from? If there was actually some conflict created by her cheating, it'd be one thing, but there's nothing. It happens and then everybody just kinda continues on their way. There's no real conversation or conflict had with Steve, and then once the true pairing happens, the two don't really have anything to do in the story. Jonathan worries about his brother, but beyond that, he doesn't have any purpose in the narrative aside from adding tension during the Will exorcism scene, and Nancy does actively nothing. At the end of the day, the relationship stuff between Nancy and Jonathan adds little to the story other than to put the two together, and doesn't really develop the characters either, which retroactively makes Nancy staying together with Steve at the end of season 1 feel almost pointless since they were going to split them up anyway. The only real benefit of Nancy and Steve splitting up is that Steve got more screen time with the kids, which was actually pretty good. But one of the most frustrating things about the Nancy and Jonathan subplot isn't necessarily that it doesn't add anything to the story and is a waste of screen time, it's that it's all the same things we saw last time, which leads me to... So when this season started, I was most interested in seeing what they were going to do with Will. He had a grand total of 2 minutes of screen time in season 1, so we never really learned a lot about the character aside from being your cliche 80s scaredy cat kid. And considering he spent so much time in the Upside Down, there was a lot of directions they could take him. When they introduced the fact that Will could see visions of the Upside Down and appeared to be dealing with something reminiscent of PTSD, I thought his storyline would be overcoming it to face down the monsters, having to go back into the Upside Down despite his fear so that he can save someone. However, Joyce doesn't want to lose him again and wants him to stay, but she has to learn to let him go so that he can grow up, yada yada yada. The two develop as characters, you get the drill. But instead of something like that, after episode 3, Will was used more as something to push the plot forward, much like in the first season. as he basically becomes a plot device to tell the other characters where to go once the Mind Flayer takes control of his body. Which meant Joyce resorted back to her hysterical mom shtick that she had in the first season, and had to gather the strength to save her son again. And if this is starting to sound familiar, it's because these are the same roles they had in the last season. Will exists as someone who needs to be saved so that the plot can be pushed forward, and Joyce is there to constantly worry about him. That's pretty much their entire storyline in a nutshell. And it was when I noticed how similar Will's relevance to the plot was in the two seasons that I started to see how much Stranger Things 2 actually recycles previous ideas. And it's not just the fanservice-y stuff like the nail bat or the Eggos either, as that's just surface level stuff, but it's that so many story beats are reused too. Jonathan and Nancy are still being junior sleuths and having awkward sleepovers. Lucas and Mike argue about a girl joining their party in order to create conflict between the two. Joyce wrecks her house in order to find a way to communicate with Will. Nancy and Steve have an argument behind the school so that we can separate them. People confuse Nancy and Jonathan as a couple in order to push them together. Steve confronts some bully to show that he's a good guy. Someone goes to see Eleven's mom for an explanation on Eleven's backstory. There's a final meetup at the Briar House in the third act so that everyone can piece together what they've learned so far. Scientists get killed off by monsters after messing with the gate in order to show the stakes. And 11 has the final confrontation with the big bad.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
We were told that this season would be bigger and better than the first one. But that leads me to the question of, is it really? In actuality, this is more season 1.1. It's a lot of the same ideas and story beats, but with a couple new characters mixed into it. We repeat many of the same arcs, the characters share similar moments, and many of the new characters don't really have any purpose. And it's when you take note of how much is recycled, you realize how little this season actually brings to the table. We're made to think that the stakes of the story are somehow bigger, but in actuality, we're dealing with the same stakes as before. Will is still in danger from being in the Upside Down, something is invading the world killing off unnecessary nice guy characters, and 11 needs to save her friends by using her psychic powers to seal up the big bad. Speaking of 11, now, probably one of the best things this season has to offer was the relationship shared between Hopper and 11. For all intents and purposes, this pair is the best written in the season and has the most going for it. Last season, we learned about Hopper tragically losing his daughter, and 11 never really had a proper father figure, so pairing these two up was a great idea. During the earlier episodes, when the two are fighting about Hopper not keeping promises and 11 leaving the house, you can see how their backstories affect how they act towards each other. With Hopper wanting to keep 11 safe at all costs, despite the fact that she could murder any threat, and 11 not entirely understanding what's going on and being frustrated because she doesn't want to be locked up like before. That is genuinely good writing for these characters and was what kept me invested during the earlier episodes. Effectively, the heart of the season is the father-daughter dynamic between Hopper and 11. However, 11's potential as a character is kind of wasted, because due to 11 having the power to solve every problem in the show, the writers have to find a way to keep her out of the plot until she's needed to fix everything. So she's sent on a solo origin story adventure for majority of the season. And this is where I have to complain about the 7th episode of the season. When it comes to Stranger Things 2, episode 7 seems to be as divisive for people as pineapple on pizza. And just like that, my opinion is the right one. Some people say that episode 7 is important because it gives 11 the motivation to go back to save Hopper and her friends after she leaves, and we'll address those claims in a bit, but to me, the episode is effectively a plot cul-de-sac. The whole trip to Chicago and the Callie storyline itself is a tangent from the main plotline that disrupts the pacing of the story to the point of tonal whiplash, and doesn't add anything worthwhile once it's over. 11 learns about her laboratory sister, goes to see said sister, has a brief adventure with her, then heads back to Hawkins for the main plot, with 11 using her anger to close up the gate as more or less a transparent attempt to try to tie this whole subplot to everything else. Now I'm sure some people will say something along the lines of, but 11 going to see Callie is necessary for her character arc. She learns about what happened to her and her sister when they were in the lab, and how to use her powers better by using her anger. That's completely needed for her to come back and close up the gate. And my response to that is it really? Do we really need this hour-long episode that entirely derails the progress of the story for that? I think we could have had the same effect if 11 went to see her mother, found out about Callie, and then as she's about to get on the bus to go find her, she finds out Hopper and the rest of the gang are in danger. This could then lead her to deciding if she wants to go save everyone, but potentially never finding her long-lost sister, which would have tied the whole theme of family that's going on with her character this season together. Plus, that would have left a more clean lead-in to exploring the stuff with 11 and Callie next season, which is likely the entire reason why this episode was put in the first place. My assumption is that the writers realized they wrote themselves in a bit of a corner with how they ended Season 1, since it ended relatively conclusively as its own self-contained cinematic story. So to avoid this problem later on, now that they're Netflix's golden child and are planning to have 4 seasons of the show, they needed to leave plot threads to explore later, hence the reason for the Callie subplot. And I don't think it's a bad idea to set up future plot threads, even though it can come off as worrying about what you're going to have for dessert before you've even finished the main course. But when it comes to episode 7, it's integrated into the plot as subtly as a bat to the face. It's shooed in after an episode that ended with a major cliffhanger, and because this show is designed to be binge-watched, it feels like the show came to a screeching halt just so that it could set up season 3. And what makes this harder to swallow is that Callie and her gang are the most two-dimensional characters in the entire show, and make it hard to be invested in what they're even doing. We have not spent enough time with these Liquid Sky rejects to care about their revenge plot against people we know nothing about, and makes the whole trip seem rather pointless. And we're also told that supposedly Matthew Modine is still alive, despite being mounted by the Demogorgon last time we saw him. Did it just give him a little nibble and then get off? Again, my best bet is that this is just baiting for stuff to do in a later season, but honestly, with how this plot thread was handled, I can't say I have any real interest in seeing where they're gonna go with it. Stranger Things 2 is the most disappointing thing since... Excuse me. Stranger Things 2 is incredibly disappointing, despite the fact it showed a lot of potential in the early episodes. It's not as bad as something like Death Note, but it definitely has a terrible case of sequelitis, and reaffirms my belief that the show should have stayed at the first season. At a surface level, there is stuff to enjoy in Stranger Things 2, but when you look at it as a whole, the entire season is this poorly constructed mess. Between badly written characters, needless fan pandering, many redundant subplots, a repetitive main plot, and awkward setups for future seasons, nothing meshes together properly, and comes off like it doesn't know what it wants to be, which fittingly shows the trouble of success on Netflix. Stranger Things 1 was a nice indie success story, where 2 brothers took their love of 80s media and made this really well put together story with interesting characters and ideas, and people loved it for how genuine it felt. But now that it's a smash success and Netflix is pushing it every way it can, to the point of giving it a needless aftershow that honestly comes off as a bit masturbatory, the show just doesn't have the same charm it once had. And I can't even say that I entirely blame the Duffer Brothers on that. I'm certain that when they originally wrote the first season of Stranger Things, it was a passion project that they spent years workshopping. They supposedly came up with the idea in 2013 and had 2 years to hone the script before needing to film everything. But then when Netflix came to them with a second season after the smash hit of the first, they had to squeeze that same amount of love and effort into less than a year. I'm sure that they tried their best to appease everyone, from Netflix to all their fans, but at the end of the day, Stranger Things 2 just flat out isn't as well written as Season 1 was.
Wow. She looks
Pretty. Good. You look pretty good.
Okay, that somehow went from a 5-minute quick rant to my longest video to date. If you enjoyed that and made it all the way here, maybe you could click that like button, or subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to see more from me now, you can check out some of my other videos here. And now that I'm all done that, I'm gonna go play some video games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.